Congress has a lengthy to-do list by the end of the month. Failure to act could lead to a government shutdown and to defaulting on our debt obligations for the first time in history. Meanwhile, the fate of President Biden's $3.5 trillion economic agenda is in doubt. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman and Chair of the House Budget Committee, John Yarmuth. Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be with you.
Democratic leaders say that the House will consider this week a bill to fund the government, and money for the government runs out a week from, 10 days, September 30th, and also to raise the debt limit, and that's going to be reached sometime about a month from now. Will the House vote to link the two, to combine them so that they vote both to fund the government and to raise the debt limit at the same time?
Actually, Chris, I don't think that decision's been made yet. We have several options for raising the debt ceiling, which is absolutely mandatory. As you mentioned, we've never defaulted on our debt in history. This is really kind of a ridiculous position to be in. We're the only country in the world that has a debt ceiling that works like this. We've raised it close to 100 times over the 104 years it's been in existence. We ought to do away with it. But the position that Republicans, primarily my Senator Mitch McConnell, have taken is totally irresponsible. And I hope that they come to their senses, because Mitch has been running around Kentucky taking credit for a lot of the spending that is now requiring us to raise the debt limit. But Mitch doesn't really care about seeming inconsistent or hypocritical. He says whatever is expedient.
Let me interrupt, if I can, just for a moment, Chairman, because as people hadn't gathered already, you and the Republican senator from your state of Kentucky, Mitch McConnell, are old political adversaries. He has taken a clear stand on the debt limit, and let's hear from him. Here he is.
Let me be crystal clear about this. Republicans are united in opposition to raising the debt ceiling.
So I guess here's the question. If you separate them, then McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate are going to vote to fund the government, but not for the debt limit. If you combine them, then wouldn't that make it harder for Republicans to vote against it? Because if they vote against the debt limit, they're voting to shut down the government as well.
Right. I'm not sure which is worse. Since I've been in Congress, the Republicans have shut the government down once, the last time being in 2013. They were paying a pretty heavy political price for doing that until some things went wrong with the ACA implementation. But yeah, I think people really need to focus on what Mitch just said. Mitch just said that every Republican in the United States Senate was prepared to vote to have the federal government default. That's what he said. And that's, I think that's a violation of the constitutional oath. It would be financial havoc if we actually defaulted. The last time we threatened to, our credit rating as a country was lowered a little bit. Financial markets did not appreciate that. So there are a lot of things at stake here. But you're right, and I don't know what the political calculation one way or the other is. I personally would like to see a clean vote on a debt ceiling so that Republicans actually have to go on the record on that vote only, and not mix it with a funding measure. But ultimately, the most important thing is to get both of them done.
Let me ask you about an issue that involves Democrats in the House. Democratic leaders say that the House will, and I thought the word choice was interesting, consider the bipartisan infrastructure deal a week from tomorrow, September 27th, which is what Speaker Pelosi promised the moderates in the Democratic caucus. Right. I guess two questions. One, does consider mean vote on the bipartisan bill? And the reason I ask, and you well know, is because some people in the left wing of your party say, hey, look, if you put up the bipartisan bill in September and you don't get to the $3.5 trillion spending bill, which we'll get to in a moment, we're going to vote against the bipartisan bill. So are you saying, is the Speaker Pelosi saying they're going to vote on the bipartisan bill next week and separate it from the big spending bill?
The only answer I can give you is that that is the current plan, to vote on the infrastructure bill on September 27th. Now, there are some other kind of qualifications to that under the rules. The Speaker does not have to actually advance the bill to if we pass it in the House, does not actually have to send it to the President for signature. She can hold on to that bill for a while. So there's some flexibility in terms of how we mesh the two mandates. One of them is to vote on that on the 27th. The second one is to not pass one without the other.
Let's talk about the big tax and spending bill, $3.5 trillion. You're going to pass it with just, if you can pass it, with just Democratic votes. And there are some serious splits between the House and Senate Democrats, among House Democrats. First of all, the size, $3.5 trillion. You've got Joe Manchin and some other Senate Democrats saying they won't go for any more than half that. How do you resolve that issue?
Well, first of all, we're not really focused on the top line of spending. I know a lot of people are, because what we ought to be focused on is what the net investment in the people of the United States will be. And as has been mentioned, the Ways and Means Committee has voted about $2 trillion worth of tax increases exclusively on wealthiest Americans and corporations. During the 10 years. So the net investment, if no other revenues are created, then that would be about $1.5 trillion. If the total spending stayed at that $3.5 trillion level. But most importantly, what we're focused on is the fact that these are things that we absolutely have to do as a country. These are not frivolous matters. We have a desperate deficiency in the social infrastructure in this country, access to affordable child care, the absence of early childhood education, the infrastructure for senior care. I mean, we have lots of seniors increasing every day and living longer, and we want to do what we can to make sure they have a comfortable retirement. So there are a lot of that's what I think we need to focus on, not the money.
Well, a lot of people say money matters too. Your budget committee is going to have to try to put all of the different parts of the spending package together. I want to ask you briefly about one other big split among Democrats, and that is whether or not to allow Medicare to negotiate lower prices so you can expand Medicare benefits. You had a number of the more moderate members of your caucus vote against that. How are you going to resolve that?
Right. Well, I know that at least two of them have said they actually want negotiation with Medicare to take place. They just didn't like the mechanism that was in the Energy and Commerce legislation. So there are ideas I know coming out of the Senate on this. I'm not sure there are very many in the Democratic caucus on either side of the building that actually are opposed to negotiation on prices of prescription drugs. I just think it's the methodology we use.
Finally, I want to put up another Fox News poll, which has some interesting results. President Biden's overall job approval is now 50% approved to 49% disapprove, or +1. In June, it was 56% to 43, or +13. And other polls have the president's job approval considerably lower, in the low 40s. Won't Joe Biden's diminished standing with the American people make it harder for Congress, Democrats in Congress, to pass his agenda when, as I say, there's less support for him generally? And this is a tough vote that you're going to have here for a lot of Democrats.
I don't think it's going to make it more difficult at all, because what we've seen in polling on what we're trying to accomplish, the American people are overwhelmingly in favor of the elements of the Build Back Better agenda. They want child care. They want early childhood education. They want to do something about climate change. They want paid family leave. They want better senior care. So we feel that we're on very, very strong political ground in pushing for these kind of investments and benefits to the American people.
Real quick, when do you think the House will pass the big tax and spending bill, and what do you think the top line number will be?
Okay. Well, I'm not going to deal with the top line number. I suspect it will be somewhat less than 3.5 trillion. Remember, that's over 10 years, and this is basically about 5% more than we're going to spend anyway. That's what it means in context. But in answer to your question, I would say we're probably going to slip past the September 27th date. Sometime into early October would be my best guess.
Chairman Yarmuth, thank you. Thanks for coming in today, and we'll track how things go in the House this week, sir.
Thank you.